This
Should
is
we be together?
Michael Delane of the Copenhagen Voice, still at the Danish Institute for International Studies, still at a meeting about a nuclear-free zone in the Arctic. With me is Adele Buckley of the Canadian National Group of Pugwash and Stephen Staples of the Rideau Institute. Adele, you mentioned in your talk earlier there is an increase in military activity among the powers encircling the Arctic region. Why do you think this is?
I think it's because there's economic value there, amongst other things. Somewhere between 15 and 30% of all undiscovered oil is there, and that's a big economic draw. Therefore, it needs protecting in some way or other. It shouldn't need military protecting. I mean, this is no benefit to the Arctic that I can see. However, this is the way that the military reacts, and we would be a lot better off if we look at our Arctic activities, whatever of the circumpolar nations are doing it, as something where we cooperate. But if we start too much military activity, we will have difficulty cooperating in the way that we ought to.
But is the military activity in itself a threat, or is it because at least two of the powers are nuclear powers?
I don't think that I don't think the present military activity is thinking much about nuclear powers. I hope this is true. I think they're just thinking about conventional military defenses of one sort or another. But who am I to know what's in their mind? But nevertheless, they think that that's what they ought to do. But how does one know what escalation could possibly occur if one proceeds in this direction? This is a dangerous direction to proceed.
Stephen, do you agree?
Oh, I do, absolutely. I think that really any time in history where you've seen countries trying to vie for more resources, they've tended to put a military side along with it. But frankly, we can't afford to do that now. And I think militarizing the Arctic even more than it already is would be a huge mistake. And there's an opportunity now that if we have discussions, if we can deal with this around the table in a reasonable way, in a cooperative way, there would be no need to divert all these resources to the military aspects. That we apply the rule of law instead of just putting brute military force there.
But this conference is about a nuclear-free zone in the Arctic. So how do these two things tie in?
Well, I think they tie in several important ways. So certainly the nuclear aspect is the most extreme expression of militarism, and that the possible use and the always threat of nuclear weapons is there. It's the largest club that there is that these states can wield, and is something that needs to be reined in. A nuclear weapons-free zone can also create an atmosphere of cooperation on security matters, where everyone agrees this needs to be moved forward, and hopefully that could move down the road. And as well, if we're able to prevent these, get rid of these overflights that cause so much trouble, that is causing a lot of concern in Canada, if we get rid of the possibility of these nuclear submarines floating around up there, not just the weapons themselves, but every sub that's up there has to have a nuclear power reactor to propel the thing and to keep it submerged for long periods of time. That would be a huge environmental benefit to not have that stuff floating around up there under the ice cap. So I think these are all interrelated and connected issues.
Well, we're working toward, in the world at large, and there's a new atmosphere going towards zero nuclear weapons. But they also, we know this is a project of many, many years and many negotiations and a whole lot of steps in between. So it is not sufficient to say, let us wait for zero nuclear weapons, let us wait for denuclearization. It will happen sooner or later, and then the Arctic will be nuclear weapon free at that time. This is a better way to do it, would be to join the movement of many nuclear weapon-free zones which are already in the world, in the southern hemisphere, for instance, and one in the northern hemisphere in what used to be Soviet Union, to actually make more nuclear weapon-free zones until finally the nuclear weapon countries become pariahs, if you like, who are the only ones left to have nuclear weapons. So we would be better off to work on this. It is possible. And that's what we should be having our governments do, and we should all pressure them to do that.
Is the combination of global warming and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which expires or should be up for renewal at the end of next year, is this a good opportunity to try for a nuclear-free zone?
Well, it is in a way, because there have to be now a whole lot of new actions occurring in the Arctic, is simply to open it and to successfully open it it's a world heritage, if you like. At the same time, it has sovereign nations all around it. So you need to cooperate and have many different regional and national and international agreements. At that same time, even though it wouldn't be a today thing, you could have nuclear weapon-free zone as an idea which is conceptual. This is what we are working toward. And if you gradually embed that, eventually it can become true because it has been thought out and worked on over a period of a few years, whatever years are.
Stephen, do you agree with that scenario?
Oh, sure I do. I think there's the new Obama administration, I know it's a cliche at this point, but the resetting of relations with Russia gives us a wonderful opportunity. And I think that whether it's a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Arctic, or a comprehensive test ban treaty, or a new deal on dealing with fissile materials, and a plan to keep weapons out of space, all of these things are rowing in the same direction. And with the Obama administration there now, and a willingness from Russia to discuss these things, I think the sky's the limit. We could have a nuclear weapons-free zone, and maybe that's just a step along the way to a nuclear weapons-free world.
A nuclear weapons-free zone in the Arctic, how long? 5 years? Is that possible?
I think in terms of a timeline, it would be difficult to say, but disarmament negotiations sometimes take a very long time to see in the results. But when there's a political will there, amazing things can happen. I mean, we've seen a rapid engagement with Russia from the United States to make sure that a new agreement is discussed, negotiated, and put together by the end of this year. And Obama only came in January. So I think we should aim high.
You're optimistic?
Well, sometimes people say, I'm a pessimist about tomorrow, but an optimist about the day after. So, although I'm becoming even an optimist about tomorrow, Adele.
And you would have?
Well, I think maybe we're talking about a decade or two, because of the history of other nuclear weapon-free zones, which we have learned, we're all learning from each other here in this conference, and they take a long time. But sometimes they gradually evolve. An agreement built on top of another agreement until eventually you get the whole thing to happen. And I think that's what happened with the other nuclear weapon-free zones, and they took a long time. But starting now is what we wish to see.
Adele Buckley, Stephen Staples, thank you indeed. Michael Delane for the Copenhagen Voice. Thank you.